recording as well. Um, One of the things that we did not cover in the previous chapter, uh, and you may be familiar because of research literacy, the idea is, I'm going to share my screen here. Um, we didn't address the idea of saturation in qualitative research. So this is the previous chapter, chapter 6. And there's a visual interpretation of the research process, particularly as it pertains to qualitative research. So your step 1 is to identify the research problem. Step 2 is identify research participants and community. Step 3 is to collect data using interviews or focus groups or whatever be the case, um, or participant observation and so on. Step 4 is to interpret the data that you have once you've collected it and try to make sense of the data by developing a theory or an explanation. Because it's grounded in data, your theory will likely be called a grounded theory. Of course, one thing about qualitative research is then you can refine the research question and identify new questions to ask new participants based on what gaps you identify in your understanding. And this is particularly true if you are researching in an area that you have no idea. So for example, if you're a white person who has never been exposed to multiple ethnicities and you're trying to explore what it means to be a racialized Canadian, you might start with a few basic questions and then you may tweak them a lot, or you might modify them and so on so that they're more appropriate to get to all the concepts that you might wish to uncover. So once you go through step 6, the next thing is to collect more data, which is step 7, and then you repeat, go back to step 4. Okay. And you go through this process a few times, which is why this arrow is there. It's an iterative process in qualitative research where you go back and forth. But there is a stop point. You just don't keep going in circles. You stop at a point, and you stop when you have saturation. Uh, so for those of you who may not remember what saturation is the idea that at this point you get no new information or no new concepts or no new ideas. It's more of the same. So say, for example, you're starting with your first interview, you're talking to an Aboriginal person who describes their challenges with finding casual employment in the city. They talk about how people make assumptions that they won't work hard. People make assumptions that they'll show up drunk to work. People make assumptions that they are used to not working and collecting stuff for free. And all of these assumptions, and they are reflected in their, not only in their workplace, but in how they're treated as well. You get this from the first person, then you modify your questions, asking specifically to each item's description. And you speak to a few more people, a few more people. In the end, you end up with a bunch of themes which keep getting repeated, which is discrimination on the basis of appearance, discrimination on the basis of name, discrimination on assumption of ethnicity, or whatever it is. And once you hit these common themes over and over, you can stop collecting data because it's unlikely that you'll get new stuff. You'll get variations on the same theme, but it's pretty much the same themes and sub-themes. So that is the idea I wanted to just go back and talk about. But other than that, what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and go back to the slideshow from last time. So we spoke about longitudinal comparison. I think that's where we stopped. And the idea of longitudinal comparison, and I think we made the example of longitudinal change, something over time, let's say 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and 20s. And your longitudinal will be, let's say, median price of homes. And let's say 100,000, 200,000, 300, 400, 500. This could be anything. I'm just making this up as we go along. So these are, so let's say, we have Sudbury and we see that, it kind of starts here. And North Bay probably starts somewhere here, a little bit lower. Oh, we should make this a double line so there's a distinction between the two, usually when you have. So this is North Bay. This is Sudbury. And then you might have Barrie go up quite exponentially later. And so on. So that would be a longitudinal comparison, because not only are you comparing median home prices at any given point, say in the 80s, you're comparing, over different time points. You're comparing the cities with each other, but also with how they've changed over a period of time. And that's what makes it a longitudinal comparison. Okay. Okay, let's do a little exercise. Imagine you're a researcher interested in studying the relationship between learning to play a musical instrument and academic achievement. How could this topic be studied with a case study, a longitudinal study, and a comparison study? So it's a very simple question. Learning, so you don't already necessarily play a musical instrument. So learning an instrument. And how is it related to academic achievement? We don't know that it is or it isn't, okay? So what you have to do now is you have to pretend that you are doing a case study, or you're doing a longitudinal study or a comparison study, okay? And you're not going to get the answer perfectly, so don't be too concerned that when you attempt to answer this, you're going to make mistakes. That is absolutely fine. There's a little box for your convenience. What is the research question you have? What are the variables, and how will you measure the variables? Whether it's a case study, whether it's a longitudinal study, whether it's a comparison study, and they might be different things. So I'm wondering if I should have you all do it in breakout rooms as a team, because this will probably take about 10 to 15 minutes. Maybe that's what we'll do. We'll split you up into breakout rooms. And how do we make sure you still have access to the screen? Well, let's try something different. I think we only have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people. So we'll have three groups of 2 and 1 person working themselves. So let's have Momina and Steph partner up. Let's have Catherine and Arthika partner up. We'll have Anita and Tree partner up. And Ireland, you can, if you're okay to go solo, let me know. If you aren't, we'll pair you up and then we'll separate one of the other pairs.
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, all right. So we'll give everybody about 10 to 12 minutes. Steph, your group has the case study. Tree, your group has the longitudinal study. And Arthika, you have the comparison study. Okay, so go ahead and think up of these things. Use a textbook if you need. We will give everybody, let's go with 10 minutes. And if you can't make it, then we'll extend the time.
Sorry, you didn't give me something.
Oh, sorry. Well, wait. Who got the case study? Steph, did you get the case study?
I did, yes.
Yes, and I don't know who your partner is anymore. I forgot.
Momina.
Okay, Steph and Momina got the case study. Who got the longitudinal? Arthika, you got the longitudinal, correct?
I got comparison.
You got comparison. Who got the longitudinal? Nobody. Ireland, that's yours.
Actually, that's me and Alana.
You and
Or Anita, sorry.
You and Anita.
Yeah.
You want to just put me in a group with 2 people?
Yes,
then?
just go with Tree's group.
Okay.
That makes it easier. Sorry, I don't have a way to put the screen up for you if I put you into breakout rooms, hence the confusion. But now, since the groups are determined, you can look at the screen and sort this out.
how do we work this? Are you putting us in groups?
Well, I'm not putting you in breakout rooms because then what happens is you no longer have access to the shared screen. So you can communicate with each other through the chat window. Oh, that's how I think it'll work. I don't. Well, let's try this. If it's a horrible disaster, we will never do this again. But we'll do it a very different way. But let's give it a shot. Let's see if you can work through the problem. Would you prefer being in breakout rooms? Do you already have the problem at hand? Do you?
It might be easier.
Okay, let's just do that.
But Mamina and I have been like communicating privately through chat. That might work for some people.
Okay. It's as long as you know which one you're doing. So you have 3 things to do, regardless of whether you're doing case study, longitudinal, or comparison. What is the research question? What are the variables, and how will you measure the variables? These are the 3 questions. So if you want to just quickly write down all 3 questions, I'll put you into breakout rooms then. And that might be the easiest way to do it. Does everybody have the questions down?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
We're good to go.
Okay. I just need an eye from the last group.
Yeah, I have them down.
Okay, very good. So let's stop share. Let's do breakout rooms. Assign manually. I'm going to try to get this right. If I make a mistake, just let me know. Yeah, 3. Okay, assign. So Ireland is with Tree, and Tree, I don't know who your third partner is.
It was
Anita? Sorry, Tree, who was it?
well, we had Anita.
Anita, perfect. Okay, great, thank you. Room 2, we go with Artika. Artika, who was your partner?
I was. And
Catherine, very good. And well, that makes it easy. So it's Mamina and Steph. Okay, so I'm going to open all rooms. Go ahead, and you've been invited to join your rooms. So. 7. That's, I think everyone is. I can't speculate on everybody else. So we are. About you. I did. All right, welcome back. Let's put up this the screen one more time. And okay. So the team with the case study, what is your research question?
Lamina, do you want to speak or shall I?
I could do it.
All right.
We're gonna be like studying to explore the connection between playing an instrument and academic achievement.
Between learning a musical instrument, I don't have enough room, so I'll just make up something. And whatever, and academic achievement. Okay, very good. What are your variables?
Steph, do you want me to keep going or?
No, I'll answer this one. The independent variable is whether an instrument is played. And then the dependent variable is marks in math class. And our study group is one music class.
So a classroom of music students, is that your study group?
Yes.
And how do you plan to measure your variables?
We decided we would just, well, since they're in a music class, so we kind of already know that they're going to play instruments.
Correct.
We were going to measure the dependent variable by looking at their transcripts.
Okay, either of you can answer, Momina or Steph. Why is this a case study?
Because it's kind of simpler and more basic.
Sorry, Momina, I missed the first part. It's what and more basic?
More simple, more basics. It's more like a first like exploration.
And just to add to that, like we've got one entity, which is the music class, and we're just exploring whether there's a possible association and kind of grounds for more in-depth study later.
So it's more of a pilot. Very good. Excellent. Good. Okay, who had longitudinal study? Anybody in the group want to tell me what your research question is?
So we had, do students in Rainbow District School Board, this is going to be long, who are learning or not learning to play a musical instrument?
Do students in the Rainbow District School Board?
Do I need to keep going?
Sorry, Tree, I absolutely did not hear anything since you said do
Oh.
students in RDSB and then nothing.
Sorry.
No problem.
Who are learning to play a musical instrument achieve higher final marks compared with those who are not learning to play a musical instrument.
Okay, and you, okay. Tree, maybe you may have to explain this to me. Why is this a longitudinal study?
We're going to, our dependent variable will be grade 1, grade 12. So they will be checked at all those points in time. Their transcripts will be looked at that point.
So you look at students from grade 1 to
12.
okay, and you'll follow the same students. Is that the idea?
Yeah.
So you're essentially following students. So it's a 12-year
Sorry?
study. So are you planning a 12-year study where you'll follow the students from grade 1 to grade 12, looking at their academic progress and their association with learning music? Is that what you're going to try to do?
Yes, correct.
Okay, following grade 1 to grade 12. And okay, so how will you measure your variables?
We said we would check their report cards.
So that's your dependent variable, report cards. And what's your independent variable?
So they're either taking lessons or not. We're
Okay.
not going to be very specific.
Okay, and that's fine. This is a tricky one, taking or not, because people take lessons and then they quit, right? Or they start later. So this is it's more challenging, but it's not impossible. You can have 3 categories saying, took for 1 year, took for 2 years, took for 3 years, and took for 12 years. So you can have all of those variables as well, and you can kind of, I don't know if you can compartmentalize them different ways, but in principle, let's believe that this is happening. So yes, it would fit the requirements of a longitudinal study, particularly if you're following the same students from grade 1 to grade 12 and asking the question, well, if you remain associated with learning musical instruments, do your scores improve? So your report cards are fine. They're your instruments of capture. Okay, thank you. Comparison study.
Okay, so our research question is among grade 7 and 8 students, does learning to play an instrument help improve GPA scores?
Okay, that's your research question. What are your variables?
Our independent variable is the student playing the instrument.
So
Right.
playing or not playing, or learning or not learning an instrument, correct?
Right.
Okay.
And then our dependent would be the GPA score over the 2 semesters of school, like at the end.
Okay, and instruments are probably going to be very similar. You have a checklist to see if they check off learning or not learning, and then you look at their scores over 2 semesters, so probably report cards or transcripts, right?
Mhm.
And the difference, as you can see, of course, all of you have worked with smaller samples like a single class, except for Tree. Tree is looking at a broader, Tree's group is looking at a broader, do students in the Rainbow District School Board, so they're probably looking at a broader range of students. But if you look at a singular class, it is, while it is a comparison study, what Catherine and her group have, because they're limited in scope, they end up becoming case studies unless you're looking at a larger school board or multiple cities and so on. And that's all fine. You have the general idea. So that was what this was about. I have some good news for you folks. The good news is today we'll probably finish quite early. And part of the reason for that is we are actually well ahead of schedule. We needed to be here after reading week. So we are actually at least 1 week or 2 lecture periods ahead of time, which means we can end relatively quickly after the next slide and just go through the questions in the back. And I shouldn't get too excited. Every time I say that we'll finish early, we end up discussing questions and then the whole class period is over. So let me put it this way. There's the potential to finish a little bit early and give you folks a little bit more time to go and start your reading week off early. But let's just see how long this takes us. Now, what I will do is I'll introduce this other video to you a little bit. So we're going to watch a little video, and the whole point of the video is this is the BBC's UP series. It's a timeless example of a longitudinal study. So what this documentary series has been doing is it has been interviewing the same group of people every 7 years since they were 7 years old. The series has captured lots of births, deaths, marriages, breakups, careers, beginning and ending, and shifts in values and politics and identities. It isn't academic research, but it illustrates the complexity of tracking the same group of people over time and the incomplete nature of any kind of snapshot study. Snapshot or your cross-sectional studies tend to be a fixed point in time. So they should be thought of as being incomplete. So what we want to really think about is the epistemological limitations of looking at a society that's always changing. This is the latest installment of 56 Up. It looks at the previous 49 years of participants' lives. So this is just a trailer. The documentary is available online. You can go to BBC and find it. It's available on several podcasts. So it's not particularly hard to find. If you're interested, you can go ahead and do that. So I'll go ahead and share my screen so we can take a look at the documentary itself. Let's see if you can get that going.
Is there supposed to be sound to the video?
Yeah, we can't hear it. I don't think you're sharing sound as well.
Oh, well, the best laid plans, right? Okay, thank you for letting me know that you can't hear it, but I'm going to put the slides up. Go ahead and take a look. It's really nice to see. There's another book called The Longevity Project. It's the author, his name is Lewis Terman. He's American. And what he did, quite similar to the BBC's project, Lewis Terman was actually a clinical psychologist, so he had good scientific training skills. He followed a bunch of 5-year-olds from well, when they were 5 and following them through their life. But obviously, because he was in his 40s when he started the study, the children would obviously outlive him as he followed them throughout their life. I think he followed 1,500 children. And it's a beautiful book. It's called The Longevity Project. And he uncovers, he interviews them at different points of time in their life. And once, of course, Lewis Terman had died, the Longevity Project continued with his his research project had grown quite a bit, and there were other people taking up. So it continued till most of these people who were 5-year-olds end up being in their 70s, 80s. Lots of them die along the way or have different life transitions and so on. But it's beautiful as to how he tries to identify, do children who are exceptionally gifted when they're young, are they the most successful? Are they the most happy? Who lives long? In the end, who lives long and who lives well? So if you ever get a chance, look for Lewis Terman's The Longevity Project. It's a beautiful read. I know right now you have lots to read, so I don't blame you for not wanting to look at one more book. But perhaps once the semester is over and we're still stuck at home with COVID and sick of watching too much Netflix, this might be a good read. It's also available as an audiobook, so whatever works for you. It's an awesome book. It has nothing to do with any of the courses, so no marks, but it's a good read. Anyway. What else do we have? We should go over the questions in the back. So let's go ahead and do that. End of the chapter. The questions are relatively straightforward, but we'll just go through them really quick so we can find out how to answer them. Okay, the questions for review. What basic question is answered by research design? So you have research design, right? You have longitudinal case study, a longitudinal study, a comparison study, a comparison longitudinal, and an experiment. What basic question are you looking to answer with a case study? Go ahead, Steph.
What is happening?
Yeah, you're asking what is happening. That's the very fundamental question. Even if you're looking for a quantitative response, qualitative response, what is happening? Can we make sense of this? That's what you're trying to answer. List the 5 types of research design and diagram each design. I think you can do that. It's in your textbook, the 5 different types. We have listed them multiple times, so it's not a big deal. Case study, longitudinal studies, cross-sectional studies, longitudinal, cross-sectional, or cross-sectional studies also called comparison studies, and then experiment. Okay. What kind of question does each ask? Now, if you want to get very technical, according to the textbook, a case study typically asks what is going on, and it's usually the build-up or the pilot for a bigger study. Okay. A longitudinal study asks, well, what's happening to the dependent variable when the independent variable changes? A cross-sectional study asks, well, given a certain variable, do we see a difference between different locations, different members of the population, and so on? It's a comparison, right? And so on. Why is the case study said to be the building block of all research design? Well, the reason we consider the case study to be the building block of all research design is often when we embark on a case study, it's because we simply do not know enough about the problem. It's a first attempt at trying to understand something. So that's why it becomes the building block for all research design. What is required to be done in a longitudinal study? And when they have questions like what's required to be done, very specifically, there's a list of things that's provided. So in your textbook, I would, let's see what page number it's on. Artika, go ahead.
The list is on 135.
Oh, it's on 135. Okay, thank you. So these lists are out there as to what you need to do. But if you understand what a longitudinal study is, then you can probably just describe it. So it's the question is, what is required to be done? The requirement is to basically have an independent variable which is either matches time or changes evenly over time, and your dependent variable can or cannot change with a change in time, or will change either positively or negatively. So the association does not need to be, it does not need to be a positive correlation between the independent and the dependent variable. So similar lists are provided for a comparison study as well, and for a longitudinal comparison study. Number 8 is actually more interesting. I don't know if it's the same, I believe it's the same number. Anyway, what are the key features of an experiment? And this is a question which has the potential to be an exam question, because it's I think there are some key differences between an experiment and any other kind of study. So what are the key features of an experiment? What do you have to have in an experiment? Steph, go ahead.
I put the experimenter needs to have control over variation in the independent variable, and can also control for the influence of other variables, like other than the ones being studied. There is an experimental group which receives the treatment or intervention, and the control group. The dependent variable is measured for all participants. The two groups need to be alike in all essential ways and isolated one from another.
And that's a very complete answer. So so basically, you have to be able to control one of the two variables. In fact, you have to be able to control more than just one of the two. You have to be able to control and manipulate the independent variable. So whether it's time, if you can manipulate, at least you have to have that under control. And you have to get rid or control for all confounding variables. So an example for that is, so if you're looking at the effect of 30 minutes of daily activity and the management of blood sugar in people, and you decide that I'm going to have two groups of people who I'm going to compare. So one group is going to have the 30 minutes of exercise, and then we're going to draw a blood sample. Second group will not have the 30 minutes of exercise a day, and we will draw the blood sample. Now, these are the things you have to control for. You have to ensure that both groups have people in the same age. You have to control for the fact that if you are interested in checking blood sugar, you have to determine what the physiological status is of all the people in both groups. Are they all going to be diabetic? Are they all going to be pre-diabetic? Or are they all going to have normal blood sugars in the first place? Okay, you have to define that. You will have to define gender. Gender is important. Our blood sugars react a little bit differently based on our gender. we might, to if we were truly meticulous as researchers, we'd have to define what diet or what food patterns they'd be on, because you can easily have some people having a carb heavy diet in the group that'll skew up your readings, while some other people who eat a very low carb form of diet, their blood sugars will be low no matter what. So that would confound your results. So these are important things to consider when having a control versus your test. And one of the key features of any experiment is intervention. Intervention is not found in longitudinal studies and comparison studies because you're just measuring what is. One of the key things in an experiment is the introduction of manipulation or an intervention, and then asking, well, what's the role of this intervention? Because your intervention truly should change the outcome. So you're trying to show a cause and an effect. Okay, so for example, your intervention in this exercise example is the exercise itself. That's your intervention. So while you fix all the controls, the intervention is a key part of an experimental design. The next question: on what basis does a researcher choose a research design? I think most of you have, or some of you have already answered that. It depends on the kind of question you wish to ask. So you choose a research design based on what you wish to be answered. Question 10, why is it important to control for other variables? And this is particularly in the case of experiments. If possible, you can do that for longitudinal studies and comparison studies, because it's often more beneficial to compare median home prices in affluent areas just to keep things even across the board. So expensive houses in affluent areas of Sudbury, Barrie, and North Bay might be in the same price range, as opposed to comparing just the median prices of homes in these three cities, which might be quite dramatically different, right? So you can control things for all of these different types of research designs. And the reason why is it important to control for other variables? Anybody want to jump in? Why do you think it's important to control for all these other factors? Well, the reason we control for all these other factors, often called confounding variables, is that we don't want them to have a role in influencing the answer and therefore our interpretation of what the answer is, right? So for example, we had an example where we had a map of the US where it shows that portions of the US where people have a lot of passports, or people who there are a greater number of people that have passports, those states in the US have lower incidences of diabetes. So having a passport makes you less likely to have diabetes. Now, it's very twisted. It's not connected, but it just seems to coincide. And the problem with that kind of an analogy or assessment is that a lot of control variables haven't been accounted for. So you end up making flawed conclusions on the basis of what you see. You control other variables so that, if you're looking at a causal relationship, then it's actually pretty straightforward to point at the cause and the effect. How does one control for other variables? And that's an interesting question based on, so that's the next question. And so the trick really is to start off with comparables between a control and an intervention group, having the samples or the specimens for the samples be very close in all the different domains or different variables as much as possible. So you're not starting with a lot of variability. And then to identify what these control variables are, what are the things that could affect a change which is not related to the intervention? And then to try to normalize for those. What is done about variables over which a researcher has no controls? And sometimes that can happen. No matter what you do, there are confounding variables. And the way you try to work that is you try to show the impact. Steph, go ahead, please.
I'm just going to say one thing you can do is to note it in the limitations section of your report.
100%. Yeah, well, one of the things you can do, as Steph said, is you can write it in your limitation saying, Although we believe 30 minutes of exercise is sufficient for people to be able to manage their blood sugars, in our study, we were unable to convince our participants to go on a regular controlled eating plan, which would have made our results more solid and more believable. That's one way to do it. The other thing to do it is to be able to measure the impact of all of these random variables on their own. So for example, you have these two groups that you have for an exercise and blood sugar management study. Now, you have attempted the study before and you know that despite the fact that you recommend people follow your quote unquote your diet, they're not going to do, and that's going to confound the results because we don't control people. So one of the ways to perhaps look at that is to have these people document what they eat anyway and look at their blood sugar management patterns. So basically to have their dietary patterns accounted for to a certain degree. Of course, one could argue that people's diets are so variable that from week to week, it could be quite different and they could confound your results anyway. And that part is true. And in those situations, you'd use the limitations sections of your research and say, hey, this was the plan, but we can't really control A, B, and C, and participants were not very accurate in maintaining a log. So this is it. Anyway, that's pretty much I have for today. We will study sampling when you all come back from reading week. I hope you all have a nice, relaxed reading week. Get some rest, get some well-earned rest, and come back fully charged. But I am still here. If you have questions, comments, or anything that you need from the course or from me as department chair, whatever it is, we can address those things.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
No problem, Anita. Anita, I have just a comment for you.
Okay, sure.
Have you guys figured? Sorry. Thank you, Artika. I think Tree is left as well. Anita, you and your partner for 4096, can you guys go ahead and your articles?
Who are you talking to?
Thank you, Steph. Have a nice day.
Yes, we did. We did email it to you.
No, I don't want the email. I want you to dump the articles in Mendeley.
The one we chose?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, all of them. Did you dump any articles?
Yes, it's all of them are there.
Oh, good. Okay, super.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, they're all there. Yeah.
Excellent. Good. All right. Well, you all have a wonderful week, and we will see you.
Thank you. Thank you.
In a week and a half. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you so much.
No problem. No problem.
Thank you.